Hi, my name is Garrett Reynolds. I am a Customer Success Director with the CSM Business Unit at ServiceNow. Today we have Arnfinn Austefjord here talking about how do we leverage CSM to deliver on the knowledge-centered service function.
Thanks for joining. We're going to be covering how you can leverage customer service management to deliver knowledge-centered service. So before we start, a little bit about myself. My name is Arnfinn Austefjord. I am the Director of Product Strategy and Management for the Customer Service Management product. My focus is on the knowledge management, self-service, and community. And the knowledge management and self-service, everything I'm going to be covering today and part of knowledge management is applicable to HR and ITSM. So even though I'm in CSM, the knowledge is applicable to all of our areas. So a little bit about myself. I recently came home from Oracle in January, where there I was leading the knowledge initiative, and so was responsible for the knowledge, the self-service, as well as the communities. And these were large implementations. So we had 1.2 million knowledge articles. We had about 5 million knowledge sessions a month, 1,000 community sessions a month. And we had many, many times more knowledge sessions solved than cases. So we were quite successful in that. Key to the success was our use of knowledge-centered service. So we rolled that out. We had 9,000 engineers, so very, very complicated environment. But we rolled that out successfully and got great adoption and learned quite a bit through the process. I not only rolled KCS out at Oracle, but also prior to that, I rolled it out at Sun and learned quite a bit through the process. I've been engaged with the Consortium for Services Innovation for over a decade now. And last year I was honored to be awarded the Innovator Award from the Consortium for Service Innovation. In addition to knowledge, I'm very focused on the self-service area and what a great portal should be. I've been judging the top 10 support site from Association for Support Professionals for a number of years, and actually have been a past winner of that when I submitted actually 2 portals that I submitted to, one for both of those. In addition to knowledge management and communities and self-service, I've been in my career heavily engaged in micro-learning, remote support, and proactive support, and these all tie very nicely into knowledge management. So let's get going here. So the first slide I'd like to talk about is the agenda. So I'm going to first focus with the customer. Why are we doing knowledge? And it's key to increasing customer value. So we'll be going through that. I have a customer value curve that I think is very helpful in trying to understand what we're trying to do with our knowledge. Go through a knowledge-centered overview, knowledge-centered service overview, as well as the benefits. Talk about how our ServiceNow capabilities support KCS. And then from my experience, as well as engaging with others through the consortium, talk about the best practices for getting your KCS program off the ground and realizing its full potential. And then measures for success of your KCS program. So have evolved that over time. So talk about some of the ideal measures that you want to do there. And then hopefully we'll have time for Q&A. So look forward to the next slide on customer value erosion.
For value first, and look at how KCS and knowledge increase customer value. But first, let's take a look at what erodes value. So one of the key things that erodes value is the time it takes to achieve that value. And so in this case, the time for resolution. The longer it takes to get that resolution, the less customer value. But it's not just the time to value, it's also the level of effort. So the more effort that the customer has to put in to getting that resolution, the less value they receive.
And the key is reducing the time to value and their level of effort. And so we really want to move up that value curve. Now, unfortunately, reactive support is lowest in the value curve. And agent assist is actually the lowest within that reactive support. And why is that? It's because it's the highest, takes the longest to get your issue resolved, and the most level of effort. You have to log your case. You might get transferred to multiple people, etc. So it's much easier to just do a quick search, and if that knowledge is there, self-solve your issue. I've done hundreds of surveys asking customers when they want to resolve an issue, what's their order of preference, and it is by far self-service, and then followed by community, and then followed by agent assist. I also give them the opportunity to put other, if they have another preference, and that predominantly is Google. So even though that's a self-service, it's much easier for them to access content via Google and other search engines, and so that's been pretty uniform from what I've seen. And so knowledge is absolutely key to moving up the value curve. But even in agent assist, knowledge is key to, for the known problems, reducing that resolution time, increasing the percentage of first call resolution, and then reducing the escalations. That agent assist and just reducing that time to resolution and such. You want to move up that value curve. And so key to that is making your knowledge accessible via your self-service. And not only accessible, but make sure it's findable and effective. Now I have community in here. This is an offering that we have, and a very important offering for customers. They often do like to participate with their peers as well as your organization to engage in questions, share best practices. But one of the other key things that we want to do is not leave that in the community. So the consortium has actually changed. It used to be knowledge as a byproduct of the case, and they've actually changed that to knowledge as byproduct of the interaction. And one of the key things that we want to do is these interactions in community, we want to actually move those up to self-service so we can get those as more structured knowledge. Oftentimes you can put more information, screen captures, etc., the product or version that it applies to. So make it much easier to consume, and again, reducing the time to value and that level of effort. And that's a key functionality that we have in our communities that I'm not aware of many other, or if any, other communities have, where we can easily create knowledge as byproduct of community interaction. But we don't want to just stop with reactive support. So we'd like to also, as much as possible, move up to auto support. And so this is where you can automate certain tasks based on certain triggers. And in the cloud environment and in the Internet of Things, there's so many opportunities to automate that support. And with that, you certainly need to tie the knowledge to that. So often people will incorporate certain event monitoring, and if they have certain events, then here's the action that they need to take and the resolution through that knowledge article. But even better than doing the auto support is actually problem prevention. So we've just introduced major issue management to quickly, if you identify a problem, to quickly resolve that problem with all users, and some who haven't even had that. And that's where it's key, and I'll go through this on another slide, but it's very key to linking, because that's really your problem signature. If you're linking well, then it's very easy to identify trends. You can put in monitors to see, to be honest, it's a little harder to monitor your cases and to see if you have similar issues. It's much easier if you're linking accurately to identify that, and then quickly identify all of those who are at risk, as well as then leverage our major issue management to notify all of them, open up cases on their behalf, and then solve that as a single issue. But in addition to major issue management, ideally you'd be looking at risks. And with a risk, let's say they have a configuration risk, they're not on the latest, they haven't uploaded the latest patch, etc. That you can, again, tie to knowledge, where you are identifying those risks, creating rules around those, and then running scripts against those products, And if they have those risks, then it's very easy for them to click on the knowledge on what do they need to do to resolve that risk. But even better than problem prevention is actually problem elimination. And again, knowledge is key to this. If you are linking accurately, it's very easy to see what's coming into Agent Assist, but it's not, wouldn't stop there. It'd also look at what's coming in to self-service. Most companies, they just focus on the Agent Assist if they're engaging with product development, but you really want to look up this whole customer value, all of the interactions. So what are they having issues with in their community, in their self-service? What are, this might not be impacting your support organization because you've fully automated it, but it's still impacting the customer. Or what are some of the things that you're asking them to do some proactive measures on? So looking at that whole value curve and collectively then engaging with development to see how can you improve that product or process depending on what you're supporting. So that's very, very key. And hopefully this gives some background on why we're doing knowledge center support. But let me get into the, I had a little thing on the other side. Let me get into what really is knowledge center support. And this, again, is hosted by the Consortium for Services Innovation. And let me first start with the A-loop. So key is capturing the workflow. So when your agents are engaging with your customer on that issue, they're capturing everything. They're capturing the product, the version, the symptoms, etc. And then with that, they're searching on that and searching often as they get more information, continually searching. Ideally, they find a existing knowledge article that solves the problem, and again, then they can quickly resolve that with the customer with reduced time to resolution and increased first call resolution. But I like to always treat those as not just, okay, I've linked it, I've solved that issue, now let me move on to the next, but how can I improve? So a good way to look at that is look at these as defects. Anytime this should be the exception center that are coming into your Agent Assist. How can you move those up that value curve? So if you look at those as defects, can you improve that article so then hopefully next time it is self-solved or through another mechanism? Oftentimes it's because either it's not attributed correctly, the product was not captured correctly. It might have been for multiple products, but it wasn't updated for that product or version, or most likely it wasn't in the customer context. So they might have been searching on my car won't start, and you have a great article on how to change a battery, but they're not making that connection. So very, very key to improve. If you can't find an existing knowledge article, then key to KCS is creating knowledge as a byproduct of that case. And again, you want to reduce that level of effort for the agent to do that. So most products, and certainly ServiceNow has this, that you just simply press a button. You're capturing all that information in the case and then transferring it to a knowledge article in the appropriate fields. So you can have the short description as the title. You can have the environment that they have, the symptoms, the cause, the solution. All those should be in your case, and simply pressing that button, then you can have a nice draft article, maybe supplement it with screen captures or whatever the case might be, and publish that. And again, with the conditional workflows, and we'll talk about that later. But it's not just the A loop, it's also what they call the B loop or evolve loop. And key to that is looking at that content health and how is it performing. And so there you want to, some of the key things, I'll just give some examples. You want to look at your search results with no knowledge found. So that's great voice of the customer. What are they searching on and why are they not being successful? And oftentimes you need a synonym. They're referring to your product in one way and you have it documented another way. Or you truly do have a knowledge gap and you want to fill that gap, or oftentimes what I find is the content is not written in the customer context. So that gives you an opportunity to either, again, create or improve. Another key report that I really find useful is you look at the knowledge articles linked to your cases but not accessed by customers, and that's a dead giveaway typically for either they've marked it internal only, and you want to evaluate how you can make that customer viewable. Maybe have certain fields that are internal only, but make the bulk of that customer viewable. Or oftentimes it's because it's not in the customer context, so you can improve that. And then other key thing is that knowledge integration. So when I shared that knowledge, that customer value curve, how do you not just keep it in that self-serve, but how do you integrate it in other things, whether it be a decision tree / virtual agent, as I noted with that proactive rule set where you can integrate it in with that. Automation, where can you, based on triggers, and you know then the solution via knowledge article, how can you do that? So a lot of opportunities, again, to move up that value curve through knowledge integration. And absolutely key in the evolve loop is that leadership, that executive sponsorship, and the constant communication, reinforcing of why knowledge is so critical. If you don't have this, to be honest, this is kind of the key ingredient. If you don't have this, typically that's why most KCS transformation implementation efforts fail, is they don't have the proper leadership. So that's just a quick overview of KCS. And now let me go into how we, actually let me go into the benefits of that, and then we'll go into how we support it. So some of the benefits, near term, what you're going to find, as I highlight on the other slide, you're going to see an improved resolution time for your known problems. And typically when you're starting, most of your problems are going to be known because you haven't implemented yet this knowledge-centered service to get those up the to self-service, etc. So you're going to see improved resolution time on those known issues. You're going to have improved first call resolution and reduced escalations. And it's going to have less stress for that caseworker. They're going to see that it's rather than having to remember everything in their head or sticky notes or have an ask a peer, they have that knowledge base to rely on. So much, much less stress for that your agent. And then midterm, what you're going to see is those known issues should be moving up that into self-service. And so you're going to see more and more of those issues resolved through self-service. You're also going to find reduced training time for new employees because you have a nice knowledge base for them to quickly get up to speed. What's interesting, though, is as your overall, when you look at cases, you're going to see from an overall, because you have so many known problems in there, overall your resolution time to resolution is going down. But as you start moving cases to self-service, what you're going to start finding often is your resolution time for what's coming into Agent Assist is actually going up. Because now you're really trying to treat that as a exception center, and these tend to be then the new problems that are take longer to resolve, and you need swarming, etc., to get a hold of the right people to resolve that issue. So, and we'll touch on how you can address that in the goaling so that you don't run into a problem there. Long term, as I've talked about again, the consortium actually has these benefits and aligns very nicely with my slide on the customer value curve, and again, what I've seen in my practice, in my experience. But you're going to see more issues automated, more issues proactively resolved, and improvements in the product and her process identified. So this is a great slide where it's helpful. You certainly want to quantify the benefits of KCS, and I think this is a perfect slide to identify those benefits and work on quantifying that baseline and then showing that improvement. So let's talk about how ServiceNow supports knowledge-centered service. So again, we'll first focus on the A-loop, the case-related knowledge activities. Key, as I mentioned earlier, is search and search often. So we do search based on the case data. Plus we have that additional search box for further searches. But what we also have in that case data, when they search on the sort description, you can also easily configure it so then it's searches on your other fields as they're inputting that data. So as they're searching on symptoms, cause, solution, every time they're putting more information in a given field, you can kick off a search. And that's absolutely key, is again searching and searching often so that you can more quickly find a solution if it's already out there, and that you eliminate the any duplicate content that you're getting in. Hopefully, again, if they are searching and searching often in your robust knowledge base, then you're linking the knowledge to the case. And we have both assisted and solved, because oftentimes you might have one knowledge article that's helping you troubleshoot, etc., and another that is actually the point solution that actually solved it. So you want to capture both of those. And then not just link, but you want to either fix or flag. And we do have, actually in London, we have a very nice feedback management system that as customers are putting in, as well as employees are putting in comments, you can actually set triggers to make sure you're sending those as a task to the appropriate person, and that you're tracking that. And oftentimes what I found in my past is when people are getting feedback and they don't quite understand it, either if it's a customer, they might just close it because they didn't understand it, or it might take them a while to get back to the person because it's more ad hoc. So within our feedback management system, we have a nice structured process where with that task, you can quickly send to the commenter clarification questions. And then once it's done, we have a closed loop process that you can send to the person who commented that this has been updated, and actually get them to sign off that, yeah, this actually did address their needs. With that, we have that supporting article versioning. So you can see exactly what you're checking out that article. So it's still in the knowledge base, but as you're working it, you're improving that knowledge, and you can see what's the difference. We have field by field comparison. So it's very easy for, if someone else is updating a knowledge article directly, for that author to see exactly what's changed. And if need be, they can revert back to the prior version. Mentioned key is creating knowledge as a byproduct of the case. We do have KCS template as one of the defaults. We have many defaults. This is in Kingston, that we have many templates, how to, frequently asked questions, etc. These are all configurable. And what's nice is, in addition to these configurable templates, we do have field level security. So you can have certain fields that are just for internal use, and even break down further than that. If you have certain fields that you just want your tier 1 audience to see, others that you want your tier 4 audience to see, you know, etc. You can all put that in. And then we do have to create that article by just simply pressing a button. You can map those fields and create that draft article. And this is absolutely key, because it's one of the key things to improving your self-service is get that, as well as improving your time to resolution on your known problems in the Agent Assist, get that knowledge published as quickly as possible. And I think the latest consortium goal is 90% of your content should be created within 90 minutes. We actually give you the capability to create that even prior to case closure. So that would be even more ideal. And we do have the support all the conditional publishing, so candidate, contributor, etc. Have all of that. So you can determine based on their experience and training what roles you want to give them to, or whether they can publish directly or if that's go through a workflow. Key, you know, again, is the KCS B loop. As they're creating that article, we do have the AQI Article Quality Index, and where then they can, your coaches can look at the knowledge being created and determine if that is actually quality knowledge. And there we've aligned to the standard KCS metrics, but you're free to change that however you'd like to do that. So we have, you know, the standard ones in AQI. Is that article unique, meaning it's not a duplicate article? Is it complete? Does the title reflect the content? Are the links accurate? Is the metadata accurate? So reviewing all those things and giving that a score, and that score is then mapped to that article, and you can then set up a task if the score is below, I'd say the typical score is 100. Out of 100, if it's below 70, you can automatically set up a task for that content to be reviewed. Similar thing, it's absolutely key, link accuracy. So many companies have issues with link accuracy, so it's key to do that audits, and we give you the ability to select samples through our reporting for that coach to then look at that to see, was that truly an accurate link? Sometimes if you ask people to link and you're also asking them to close as many cases as possible, sometimes they're just linking generic articles. So it's absolutely key that you have that feedback loop for that continuous improvement. And then there's a lot of health reporting. I'll actually cover this on another slide, but there are a tremendous amount of reporting that you want to look at to have your domain experts look to make sure that you truly have healthy knowledge and it's achieving the desired result. So kind of the checklist, what I found over my experience for knowledge-centered transformation service transformation is first you want to define what's your strategy and your measurable business success goals. In order to get that executive champion, you really need to identify what's in it for the business. And that checklist I showed you on the KCS benefits, that's a nice place to start to identify what you see as the benefit, and then present that up to your executive leadership. And it's absolutely key that you're getting their support. Oftentimes what I find with executive leadership, they're so focused on the case, and they tend not to look at the self-service, etc. But it's absolutely key as they move up that value curve, they're greatly reducing their costs as well as improving the customer value and customer satisfaction. So by showing that value curve and some data there and how with KCS you can move up that value curve, reducing costs as well as improving customer satisfaction, it tends to be, if you have the data, et cetera, it tends to work out very well to get that executive leadership support. And then you want to look at the goals. Sometimes your goals are not aligned. You might have goals really focused around the case, and you need to up-level that to more of the customer issue. You might have, cases per engineer, et cetera. If everything is revolved around the case and then you're moving things up the value curve, you're not going to have happy support managers because they're going to actually get dinged for that. And so it's absolutely, you need to make sure that everything is aligned. All of the goals, compensation is aligned. And then also key is developing a change management plan. So you're looking at all your key stakeholders, identifying who's for your initiative, who's neutral, who's against, and make sure you're getting everybody on board. And oftentimes it's because there's not alignment in the goals, or they don't quite understand it. So it takes some interaction with them to get people on board. But what I've found is once you educate and once you have the goal alignment, everyone seems to get on board. The other thing is with your agents in that change management plan, it's really good to just show what you want them to do differently. So show, here's what you're doing today and here's what we need you to do differently. And that's very helpful for them to get on board. And absolutely key, what I find, particularly if you're driving in a very large organization, but even small organizations, you want to have that metrics dashboard so you can track all those activities and business outcomes. And what I find that helps very, very much, I used to have the essentially a horizontal review where I'd have, in my case at Oracle, we had 9,000 engineers and a variety of VPs managing them. So I would do a horizontal review based on all of the activities and outcomes and goals, and show how they're comparing to each other, and allowing them to drill down to their teams, and allowing the team, the manager, to drill down into the individuals. And that was very, very helpful. The more you can make this very, very visible, the more traction you're going to get. Because if it's, I used to present to the EVP quite often, and typically you want to do this like once a quarter, and you're having the VPs in the room too, and or on the call, they're seeing how they're comparing to others. And that, with that visibility, and again, with their management, they tend to want to make sure that they're definitely above average, and if not the top. So that, I found that's a great tool to do. And then technology, I have this lower because technology, to be honest, in KCS, it's certainly an enabler, but the people, the process, the goaling, the metrics, the training, et cetera, are equally important. So, but you want to make sure that you have a technology roadmap with ServiceNow. If you're on, let's say, for example, you're still on Jakarta and you see all these great things that I mentioned for KCS that are in Kingston as well as London, you want to have that mapped in your transformation plan when you're going to get it out, and then the associated training. Also want to have a roles and engagement structure. So for example, in my companies, my group was kind of the overall owner and strategy owner and the people, the process, the tool, etc. But I would have a kind of an engagement structure with the knowledge champions, and then looking for them to engage with the domain leads. So you just need to make sure that you're constantly communicating and you have a nice engagement structure. Key is also, particularly with your agents, as well as your coaches and your domain experts and managers, etc. Make sure you have a training and certification plan. The KCS Academy, which I'll have a slide on there, has some great training, KCS training. Typically, you'll want to have also some of your own training and certification aligned to your specific product and process. But that's absolutely key to enabling your agents. Also key is a reward and recognition program. What you're going to find is typically your reward and recognition is often centered around the case. So you want to have kind of a radar chart, balanced scorecard, so you're not only seeing the case activities, but the other activities they're doing in your knowledge. So you're properly recognizing that. Also looking at the value that's being created. So if people are creating a lot of knowledge that's helping resolve cases quickly, helping self-service, etc., you want to recognize that. And then finally, if you do need help, KCS Transformation Consultant is often very helpful, where they can get in, help you out in establishing a program. If you need a kind of a tune-up where you're running into certain problems, very, very helpful in helping you address that. So let's talk about some of the more detailed best practices. So with KCS, you have, as I was mentioning before, you have different roles. So you have the candidate, the contributor, the publisher, the coach, the domain expert. You want to make sure that you identify, and you can tailor it. I've found that these roles work out very, very well. But then implement that into your workflow, define your article types and the associated structure. And so again, we have field level security, so you can identify those fields that you want to have, and then what the security level is on the various fields. One note of caution, sometimes people, I found actually in my career, one of the first things I had to do is there was too many article types. And that tends to happen where someone just wants a slightly different bend on things, and they create another article type. You want to tightly control that. You only want to have certainly less than 10, maybe a handful of article types. And again, I see this in many companies where they just get a little too creative there. Customers, as well as agents, you want consistency. The quicker it is to orientate yourself and then focus on the content, the better. If you have too many article types, that definitely hurts you. You also want to make sure you're consolidating your disparate knowledge bases. In this case, certainly since we're ServiceNow, we're saying in the ServiceNow, but whatever, if you're not a ServiceNow customer and you're doing this, you want to make sure you're having it in your a single knowledge base. Early in my career, taking over the knowledge program, had people putting in wikis, SharePoint, Word, sticky notes, etc. It's very, very hard to drive transformation. You don't have that consistency. It's very hard to find that information, certainly impossible to move up to self-service with that. So key is getting those, identifying all those knowledge bases and getting those into your single repository that's tightly integrated into your workflow and such. And certainly with ServiceNow, you definitely want to get that into the ServiceNow knowledge base. As an interim, we do have that external content integration, where if you do have SharePoint or other things where you're not quite sure what should be moved in, you could put a knowledge wrapper around that, and that way it's part of the unified search. You can link it, and then with knowledge content-based, refined based on reuse, you can then determine what you want to actually bring in. So that's an option if you have a very large knowledge bases and disparate knowledge bases that you're not quite sure what to bring in. You want to make sure that agents are linking or creating, and very few cases should have no knowledge applicable. Done a number of surveys when I've been at the consortium asking what the average is, and predominantly after multiple events, it's pretty uniform, about 5%, where you have no knowledge applicable. That's very customer specific, and nothing was learned from that could benefit everybody else. So it's key to make sure that again you're tracking that to make sure they're linking and creating. But make sure, as I point out, that they're not only linking and creating, but they're doing it accurately. So you can use the AQI as well as link accuracy reports to make sure that those are being met, and again, track those. So you want to monitor and improve that. So you're tracking the activities and coaching as needed, and you're goaling on the business outcomes. And this kind of leads to what is a good metrics dashboard. So what I find from an activities is looking at, again, cases with no knowledge applicable, and you want to keep that very low. Oftentimes, when you first start out, you're going to find that's very high, and you want to start moving that down through, again, the coaching. Look at cases that are created with knowledge and the associated AQI. So you're not just looking at the volume, but is it quality? Similar thing with cases with knowledge linked, but then also looking at that link accuracy. And again, that's a sample. Both of these are samples, but it'll give you a good indication if you're doing it enough. But not just linked. It's great to look at percentage linked, but also then the percentage of those linked articles that are fixed or flagged. So are you actually improving your knowledge, not just linking and closing? While I say you mainly want to track activities, I find that it's good on certain to actually have a goal to kind of set the expectations. So time to publish knowledge, again, Consortium has a goal 90% within 90 minutes. It's great to establish a goal to set the expectations with your agents and make sure that your processes are aligned there. Also, as you get feedback, you want to make sure you're acting on that very, very quickly. So you want to have a goal around feedback processing. I find that for a customer, it's very infuriating if they take the time to give you feedback on a knowledge article and they go in a month later and they see it still hasn't been fixed. You want to encourage them. They want to help you improve your knowledge, and as well as the agents want to do that. And the quicker you respond to that, the more you're going to get them to continue to do that, as well as certainly improve your knowledge base very quickly. You also want to make sure that your content is current. When someone's looking at content and they see it's very old, they tend to have less confidence in it. So you want to have a goal around hits on articles updated within the past X months. I used, I believe that was 12 months. 90% of the content hits should be on the content update in the past 12 months. We do have in ServiceNow a nice feature here where you can not only have that report, but then you can say, like, if something hasn't been updated X minus 1 month, you can automatically create a task where it goes to the author for them to review and then update that again. And they can update just by noting that it has been reviewed. So again, to give that confidence to the users. And then you want to look at percent of internal only articles. Typically, again, when companies are started, the majority of their articles are internal only, and you really should have that to low single digits. And with that article, the field level security, that I find is extremely helpful, because oftentimes there might be some internal only content for that, but the majority of it is appropriate for a customer. And by giving them that field where they can put that internal only content, make the article public, that's absolutely key. As I mentioned before, percentage of searches with no results found is a key one to be looking at, and really driving that down as much as possible and setting goals around this. The outcomes usually should have goals. Knowledge sessions without a case create is a great one. When I judge the top 10 support sites, many of them will have that in their submission, how well they're doing there. And we do have clickstream, so we have that data. If they are opening up a knowledge article, we can see in that session what are they doing. And so that's a key report to look at the success of your self-service. And then comparative traffic. You want to look at, I showed you that value curve. You want to see what percentage of your issues are solved in your agent assist, your community, your self-service, your automated, etc. And looking at how you do that. And in fact, for reactive support, oftentimes companies will do those three, the case, the community, and self-service. Many of them just look at creating formulas based on hit data. That's kind of the simplest to do, where you might say, I've seen some companies that for every 8 hits on their knowledge articles through surveys and such, they've found that that equals 1 self-service issue resolved. Even more refined than that, I've done in the past surveys where you can do post-session surveys asking them were they successful, and that really helps you. You just need a sample size with to get a low error rate, so with a 95% confidence interval, if you're plus or minus a couple of percent, that's very good. And there's lots of online calculators. I might do another talk about how you can do some of this. But the offline surveys is one way. Even better is actually to do session surveys where you're asking them when they're leaving, were they successful or not, and again, having that sample and using that data. But the key is any of these things that you do, you want to be consistent, you want to trend those. And that's what I found with my executive management. As long as I'm being consistent, they can see the trend and the improvement. And that's absolutely key, because this is, to be honest, one of the big areas that people are looking at it. Well, how do you can't quantify case deflection. And to be honest, we don't call it case deflection. That's why we call it comparative traffic, because what I find through session surveys and such, when we ask them, were they successful? And then we ask, well, what's the next step? It's not always creating a case. It might be asking a peer. It might be logging it on the community. It might be searching another support site, etc. So just because it's resolved in the self-service or community doesn't mean that that was deflected. But again, if you look at these 3 channels for your reactive and you're looking at the percentage of issues being resolved and trending that works out very well. Again, you do want to track, this is going to be great for getting that near-term leverage, looking at improved resolution time, improved first call resolution, reduce escalations. That's a great one to track and get that support. But again, be warned that as you move up these known problems up to the value curve, you're actually going to see these things will take a turn, because then you're truly should be working this as an exception center and dealing with mainly new problems. So let's and we'll hopefully have a little bit of time, but I'll leave this for where to go for more information. So the KCS Academy, which is the for-profit arm of the Consortium for Services Innovation, is a great place to get information. You can see here they have the practices guide that's freely available. You can look at that. A lot of information there. They leverage that practices guide for their training, and so you can take some really nice online training, as well as they have some really deep dive training and associated certifications, and then a number of case studies that are also very helpful for getting ideas. So this is a tremendous resource. So the KCS Academy is a tremendous resource for self-service as well as in-depth training. But if you do have additional questions, feel free to submit your questions in the community. I'll go in and try to answer as many as I can. Please also share your best practices. I mean, this is, we want to benefit from each other. So if there's a question and you know the answer, please jump in and answer that. Or if you have best practices that you found, please share that with others. So thank you for your time today, and look forward for the continuing engagement in the community. Thank you very much.